Hey guys, Will here from machinelowest.com. If you recall in last video, and you don't need to watch the last video to watch this video, but in the last video what we did was we extracted data from Reddit using Reddit's PRA, which has some APIs for pulling submissions and posts. We took that data and we put it into AWS's data storage in DynamoDB. And what we found from DynamoDB was that we could easily take data, NoSQL data, and push it into a database. And we created a table called articles, and we began storing data in there. Now, the issue with that is we needed to run that program locally. Whenever we wanted data, we'd have to fire up a terminal, input our incantation, and then data would start to flow into the database. Now, what if we don't want to have to continually update and run that function? What if we want to automate this? Now, we can do that with another AWS service, AWS Lambda. And in this video, we are going to automate that pipeline so it runs on a regular schedule, say like every 4 hours, every 8 hours. We could even make it a lot faster than that. You could do it every 5 minutes if you wanted to, every minute. So let's dive in. Okay, so from the AWS Management Console, what we're going to be working with here is Lambda. And your dashboard when you initially start might not look like this. I am using, actually let's start this. Let's start from fresh. So author from scratch. I'm going to call it automated data pipeline. And it's going to be a runtime of Python 3.6. And I have an existing role, which is this service role Casper, which has some of the high-level access that I'll need to access my DynamoDB database. If you don't have that access, and initially I didn't, what will happen is you'll get a traceback saying that the role that is picked won't have the ability to push data in there. So this is what our initial Lambda function looks like. Okay, so there's a lot going on here, but why don't we jump down to looking at the Lambda function itself. So this is the hello world Lambda function, and you'll notice that you can actually edit the function here just within AWS, and then create this Lambda function. And this is the Lambda Handler, which takes an event and context. And this is going to be important to remember. We could rename this to anything we want. We would just have to change what it is here. You'll notice that this folder is automated data pipeline, and it's lambda function.py. So we have lambda function.lambda handler. So what do we want to do with this? Now let's switch back over to our code base. Okay, so if you recall, this is the structure of Casper, which is the repository that we're working from. And in this repository, I have a data repository, and this is where we built out in core that function that we can run locally, and then it'll do all of the data processing that we need. Now, again, we don't want to, well, what we want to do is move all of this functionality over to Lambda so that we can schedule it and have it run on a timetable. Now, to do that, what we're going to need to do is package up all of this code into its own zip file, and then what we can do is upload that zip file to AWS and have the Lambda run there. So what I've done here is created this folder Lambda. Now this looks like a lot of stuff, and there is a lot of stuff in here, but it's not our stuff. Our stuff is in this reddit.py. Our stuff is in this reddit.py file. So what I've done is essentially take from the previous video all of that code that we wrote in order to get an article, to compose it, and to return it into just a dictionary, a submission, a Reddit submission post. And I've taken that and put it into functions here. Now, the main function here, this Lambda handler, if you recall what we're just looking at, is the main function that we want. So let's look at this Lambda handler. What this does is it grabs, I just have it grabbing a random subreddit from the list of subreddits that I'm going to put on here. I'm going to put on a couple more. Entrepreneur, and then I like reading Entrepreneur Ride Along. I think that's the name of the subreddit. Yeah, that's it. So there are a bunch of subreddits that we're going to pull from in here, just a big long list, and each time this runs, it's going to randomly grab one. Now, it could grab the same one twice, but that's okay because data updates all the time. People add more comments. There are new posts, and we want to grab those. Okay, and then we grab the articles table. This is our dynamodb table that we access via this function articles table that we wrote in the previous video. Then our data is data for subreddit. So I'm passing in the random subreddit that we pulled out, the name of it. And then for each type of post, for hot, top, and new, I'm going to say pulling posts from, and then the name. So this will be like blogging, and then hot, the hot posts. Okay. And then the data that we get back in kind is going to be this big list of dictionaries that we're going to push into the DynamoDB database. And I have attempting to save article. Why don't we just say saving, and then the title of that article, and then it gets pushed into the articles collection. So these print statements are what will show up in our CloudWatch logs that we essentially get for free. And I have an older version of this that I've been running, I think every 4 hours now. And this has attempting to save article. And so pulling blogging posts from hot, top, and new, and then it saves all of these articles. So what we should see now, and I didn't even have to set any of this up really. It comes with the functionality that we're just going to set up in this Lambda function. So the Lambda handler is the main entry point for AWS Lambda. So now what we can do is take this. So we have this function that we built, and it does whatever we want it to do, but we need to get this into AWS. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, what we need to do is install the dependencies. And I import random, which is a standard Python library. But I also have praw and I have bodo3. And these are the main components, and all of the dependencies are the main components of this Lambda directory. I need to install them locally. And how I do that is running. So right here, I'm in my Lambda directory, and I need to install these dependencies locally. So to do that, we run pip3 install bodo3. And so we just give pip a couple of extra arguments on the end. Okay, so pip3 install bodo3 -t and then // will install those directories locally. Okay, so it's pip installing into this Lambda folder. So we do that for bodo3, and you do that for Lambda, and you get all of these modules here within the folder. Okay, so once that's done, now we have to zip it up. And what we can do is, I'm going to call this data pipeline. We just run zip recursively. We're going to put the zip file in the previous directory, and then we're going to zip everything here. Okay, so all of these files are going into just a run-of-the-mill zip folder. Okay, so now what I can do is see that this data pipeline zip was created. desktop. And then when we unzip it, we can make sure that it contains what we really care about. Here are all the modules, but I really care that reddit.py is here. And it is. And it's what we expect. Okay, so now let's go back to our CloudWatch manager. AWS. Oh, by the way, everything that I've done up until this point, which is run a bunch of AWS Lambdas, I'm still on the free tier, and this hasn't cost me anything yet. So a lot of this is very cheap, and I encourage you to use it. Okay, so what we can do is, instead of edit code inline, we can upload a zip file, and we'll just pull that data pipeline zip that we made. And instead of lambda function.lambda handler, this is going to be data pipeline dot lambda handler. Okay, and we'll save that. Okay, so it's saved. Now this is a lot of information, but we could still invoke our function, which is all we really want to do. You can input environment variables and tags and execution roles and things like that, which we have already set. I'm going to set the timeout. Actually, I'm going to set the memory to a little bit higher. And I'm going to use the maximum timeout, which I think is 15 minutes. Okay, I'm going to save those. Now, what I want to do is add a trigger for this. And so there are a bunch of triggers that you can do. You can have the Lambda trigger when you upload a file to S3 or something else. I use CloudWatch events. Okay, and the role, so the rule that we're going to set, I'll create a new rule, and I'm going to call this every 2 hours. And I'm going to execute every 2 hours. Okay, and you can do the cron syntax, which is pretty common, or you could just do rate and 2 hours just like that and enable the trigger, and that should work. Okay, so now save that. So all of this is set up now. So what's going to happen? So this should work, and we can see it working by going to AWS CloudWatch, because Lambda here has CloudWatch logs set up. So we have it, we have a log group, and we could go and monitor it. Okay, so this is automated data pipeline. You'll see that the log group made it for us. We have the last event time. Okay, so no module named data pipeline. So what's also nice is that we get this feedback, we get tracebacks, so we can go and take a look at what's happening here. So automated data pipeline. So this says data pipeline.lambda handler doesn't exist. And I think, let's go and take a look at our file structure. It says data pipeline here. So it should be data pipeline.lambda handler. Okay guys, so I am having a bit of trouble figuring out why I'm not able to see these logs. I think it's having to do with my permissions on the log group, but I think the critical piece that I was missing here is, instead of having data pipeline or automated pipeline.lambda handler, it's actually reddit.lambda handler, and that should give us what we need to see that function and to execute that function. So hopefully by the next video I'll have a follow-up on why I wasn't able to view the logs in execution, but maybe you'll have better luck. So hopefully this has been a little bit beneficial to you. It's really useful to automate your data pipeline, and we'll catch you in the next video. If you haven't already, guys, please like and subscribe, or subscribe and ring that bell so you get all future videos. We'll catch you later.